Hey World History, welcome to U2-L4, Middle Kingdom. The years for that, it's going to be about 2055 to 1650 BCE. And again, if you forgot already, my name is Miss Corey. Alright, so your job today, you're going to watch the Ed Puzzle. Questions that I just want you to answer on the Ed Puzzle will be on blue text. Important concepts that I want you to write in your study guide will be in red text. And of course, if you have questions, please email us or you can come to office hours. Learning targets describe the development, characteristic, and decline of civilizations in Egypt. So let's start right off. We're going to talk about a little bit more about war and as pharaohs, like what their role was. So a pharaoh had an obligation to conquer new land. Like that was just part of the religion. They're like, if you're a pharaoh, you're going to be an awful pharaoh if you do not conquer new land. So where did Egypt get the land to conquer? Nubia. That is the answer. So we talked about Nubia last time. So in last video, what did I say about Nubia and its major region of Yam? And I'm not talking about the food, by the way. I'm talking about the area. All right, so again, just to recap, Nubia is the land south of Egypt. It is still really important that it's on the Nile. Today, it would be considered part of Sudan. And Yam's major region in Nubia had desirable goods like gold, ivory, frankincense, myrrh, animal products, stuff like that. So again, like we said here, so like here's Egypt, more up here on the lower Nile. And then here is Nubia with Yam right in here. We talked about too how they were city-states, so they weren't really unified. They were just kind of chiefdoms. They didn't have like a national army like Egypt did. So my next question for you is, what does annexation mean? And no Googling, just take your best guess. So annexation. That is when a country, like Egypt, takes over another country's territory using its military. It could be a whole territory, or it could just be part of a territory. It doesn't also mean that there was necessarily battles that went on. It could literally mean like Egypt marched into a different country and was like, we're going to rule this now. And they're like, okay, cool. That's awesome. But typically there were some sort of battles or conflicts going on for the land. It's not a really great way either to make friends with other countries, to annex somebody's land. So that really led to a lot of conflict, even to today it does. So forts were definitely made when a new area of land was annexed to show that like, hey, this is my land now. I'm going to build a giant fort and show that I'm really strong and I'm better than you and I rule this land. So, one of the most famous annexations of Nubia would be under the rule of Senusret I and Senusret III, who annexed the northern part of Nubia. And these two pharaohs built walls and forts along the second cataract of the Nile to show that they conquered that land. They're pretty cool. So, I just said cataract. And you're like, what the heck is a cataract? So, I am not talking about the eye surgery and when one's eyes get clouded. No, that's not the cataract I'm talking about. A cataract is an area of a river where it's wider, shallower, and more rapid with lots of rocks and possibly even islands. So rivers around the world can have cataracts. The Mississippi River has cataracts. I think there's one, I want to say like Lake Pepin is considered a cataract. Anyway, besides that point, the Nile has a lot of cataracts, and they can be up to 30 miles long. So here's kind of the picture to get you an idea. You can see like rocks sticking out of it. You can probably see a little bit more rapidy. You can kind of see the flow of the water a little bit more, and it's a lot more shallower. So it's really hard for boats to get through. So as you can see here, down here on the arrow, let's see here, right here, that is where the second cataract is going to be, is right down there. So, how do historians know these walls and forts even existed? One of the first things is steles. What steles are is, here's an example of them. They're stone slabs found around the second cataract, giving praise to military success of Pharaoh. So whatever, I know we can't read this as like English readers, but this describes like, hey, this Pharaoh got this piece of land and built this fort here, and it's like pretty much a memorial to that. Also, ruins remain, as you saw on the last slide. There were pictures of it because they still stand even today. And also soldiers' graffiti on building materials and rocks, like you can see up here, where they would draw pictures or write certain words, just like people graffiti today. So Egyptian soldiers were recruited among the common folk. Some made careers of being a soldier, but most of the time it was like, hey, you're going to get drafted and you're just going to do this like one-time campaign to like Nubia or wherever, and then you're good to go for the rest of your life. So one of the major things about like being in the military, right, is then you get to live in a fort. And some of these forts were pretty cool. So here is an artist rendition of one of the forts that we'll talk about. But before we get into the next slide, my next question for you is this. Name 2 things that you'll observe about the artist rendition of this Egyptian fort. All right. So, forts were always placed by the Nile, not only for a fresh water supply, but also for boats to come in and out, and definitely by trading roads as well. So there's always fresh supplies of both soldiers and like food that needs to come in. And they're also always by stone quarries or mines because you need to get the stone from somewhere to build these super awesome forts. So forts, especially in ancient Egypt, but even throughout history, included things like huge walls, ramparts, which are super fortified walls that like you just can't break down, and ditches, bastions, which are walls at an angle. So with bow and arrows, you can like shoot from many different directions. There's also fortified gates with drawbridges. And inside the fort itself, it had barracks, so that's where the soldiers are going to live. It had workshops, it had offices, and it had temples to gods as well. So merchants from Nubia could not pass through the Nile without the Egyptian fort's permission. And pretty much what that meant, the merchants just had to pay a tax to get through there. And the most famous fortress, which is the one of the artist rendition right here, is the fortress of Buhin. So let's talk a little bit more about the fortress of Buhin. So it was built and expanded by Senusret III from 1878 to 1843 BCE. Here is a statue of him, by the way. After the 13th dynasty, which is about the 1700 BCE, Egypt really did not have a stable government anymore. They were not unified, so that lost a lot of political control of foreign forts, including the fortress of Buhin. So here's what the fortress of Buhin looks like today, by the way. So my next question for you is this. What do you think happened to the soldiers living in Fortress of Buhin after Egypt lost political control of it? So, after Egypt left the Fortress of Buhin, soldiers were like, hey, this is like an awesome, like little tiny city. Let's make these barracks into just our houses. So that's what they did. And they raised families. And these Egyptian soldiers stayed in Nubia, which would eventually become rivals of Egypt, but that's a long story down the road. But yeah, so they repurposed the fortress, which is really cool. And here is a statue, by the way, that usually like upper class Egyptians would do. They would make statues of like the husband, the wife, and then the children, which are always portrayed as so tiny, which I don't understand, but whatever. All right, so that's all we got for the Middle Kingdom today. I know, again, breeze through it. So today we learned about the characteristics of the Middle Kingdom. Again, that's just going to be throughout the Ed puzzle. We talked about annexation, forts in Nubia, and the fortress of Buhin. Next up, you're going to do U2-L5 New Kingdom Ed puzzle. If you have any questions, please email your teacher, Mrs. Hinkle, or me. If you want to learn more, please let me know. I'll be happy to share more information. My office hours are from Mondays from 12 to 1. Mrs. Hinkle's is from 2 to 3. And for my class, please do the weekly check-in. That's all I got. See ya.